Thanks very much, Anthony. Yeah, it's a great privilege to be here. As you can tell, 24 hours on a plane has done something to my voice, so adding a bit of jeopardy in there. Is it going to last the 40 minutes? But it's a real honour to be here. It feels like it's an exciting time for the Australian berry business. And, as I'm sure my Aussie relatives who live in Fremantle and Mandurah over in Western Australia would say, why do you need a bloody pond to tell you what to do? Well, we've had a lot of experience of the berry business. We cover the entire fresh produce business globally. And around 20 years ago, a few people from the UK berry business came to us and said, it would be really great if we could get together. We've got the strawberry guys, we've got the blackberry guys, we've got the blueberry guys, very small in those days. We'd like to get them together. We've got some friends in Chile who we're working with, importing stuff. We're building a market here in the UK, but we just need to get together. And that was about 20 years ago. So we started the Global Berry Congress at that point. And in that time, the size of the UK business has exploded. It's enormous now. You're talking about a few tens of millions up to 100, 200 million, and now you're talking £2 billion in value in that market. And it's now the number one most valuable produce category in the UK. And that's then had an impact on other parts of Europe. So Germany has suddenly become a market which is really into berries. So I'm hoping today I can share some of that insight into what's happened in the rest of the market, in the global market, and maybe that will give you some ideas that chime with what you're planning to do with your own business. So just by way of thanks, you can see there Wayne Prowse's name there. Wayne Prowse does quite a bit of work for us now. He was very involved in Horticulture Australia for many years. He's given me plenty of help with my stats. He's a very, very good stats man. So I know, spending 12 months in Antarctica is a challenge. You've got to spend 40 minutes listening to quite a few stats, so I hope that's okay for you. I'll also thank my colleagues who are here with me. John Hay is the Managing Director of Fruitnet Asia, and also Liam O'Callaghan is here. He's the editor of Produce Plus. And if you need any of us for anything, just come and give us a shout. So we'll make a start. You've kind of understood what Fruitnet is. I won't bore you with that, but we are a publisher and event organizer for the entire fruit business and vegetables. Okay, so we're going to look at production. Just to give you the overall picture, global berry production is around about 13.8 million tons. That was in 2023, and increasing. And of course, it's no surprise to know that the majority, for the time being at least, is strawberries. And we'll come on to what's been happening in blueberries and rubus, as you call it. And there you can see, the size of the global production, 10.5 million tons of strawberries, and the others are still relatively small. And a lot is said about blueberries, and that seems to be where the action is. I know there's big investments in blueberries in Australia for potentially for export markets. But yeah, if we look at the global production, you can see that the southern hemisphere is surprisingly small still. You've got China producing a lot in Asia, but largely that goes to the domestic market. You've got the Middle East and North Africa, where there has been expansion, and I'll come on to those and how that's happened. That now more or less rivals Europe in terms of production, which is no insignificant stat. And then if you divide up the southern hemisphere here, you can see that Peru is very dominant. That's grown a lot. Brazil largely producing for itself. And as we'll come to here, the expansion of blueberries in Peru has taken it way beyond Chile. Chile used to be the dominant player in terms of counter-seasonal supply from the southern hemisphere into Europe in particular, also North America, but Peru has effectively taken over. So strawberry production, you've got the US there, eating a lot of its own strawberries, no surprise there. China doing the same. And then you've got a few key players, Turkey, Egypt, Mexico, and then some other smaller ones. And what's happened there over the last 10 years is Egypt has started to produce a huge amount more. Now, a lot of that still goes for frozen, but it's positioning itself, and it's actually doing the same in blueberries on a smaller scale, to offer a competing source of supply to Spain in Europe. You've also then got Turkey producing a lot more. Turkey and Egypt are probably the most significant in terms of the export growth potential. Then you've got raspberries and blackberries. Excuse me. I thought this would happen later, but never mind. So that's on a smaller scale, but you can see there a few key players. And where is the growth? Well, the growth has been... sorry, let me take that on. Yeah, the growth has been particularly in Mexico, in Portugal, in Morocco, and then also in China. And then blueberries. Blueberries is really where the fastest growth has been. You've got the US producing a lot. You've got Peru producing a huge amount. Potentially could even take over the US pretty soon. And China as well producing a lot of blueberries. And that just really shows you the growth. The growth in Peru has been phenomenal, but also in those other countries as well. And there you can see Australia. This is representative of the growth percentage. And so 15.7% over that time is no small amount. So there you can see, that tells you where the action has been. There are developments in strawberries, there are developments in raspberries and blackberries, which is that one on the right. But yeah, 11.5%, and that's per annum over that time, is immense. So global production, we forecast, based on the growth rate that there has been over the last 5 years and 10 years, we expect global berry production to top 15 million tons by this year. Okay, so let's go on to talk about trade. And certainly this has become a more common sight, the formal supermarket presentation of berries. But this is still very much the majority of the market. There is potential for more of this kind of thing, definitely. But the global berry trade, the amount that is exported and imported, is actually only 17% at the moment. That equates to 2.4 million tons and 11.3 billion US dollars. In terms of strawberry exports, strawberries you can see there in Turkey, that's where the most significant growth has been. And these stats will all be available, so don't worry about taking it all in right now. I didn't want to dwell on every single cell of that chart. But you can see there that there's been a bit of a pattern in terms of the one-year trend, that there was some downturn in production. But overall, over that 10 years, there's 7% growth in raspberries and blackberries. Sorry, have we skipped? Sorry. Yeah, that's right. And then in blueberries, I've picked out these three because these three are not the obvious candidates. These aren't the ones that people normally talk about. Serbia, Romania, and Portugal. But they're all starting to have a sizable blueberry business. And you can see the growth numbers there. And they're bubbling under. They're underneath these more obvious, the more obvious focus of attention, which is the largest. And then you can see who's growing within that. So Peru we've talked about, but also Mexico, Morocco, South Africa, producing a lot more. But there's quite a few underneath. I'll come to that in a moment. This really underlines what's happened with Peru and Chile. So Chile, in theory, had a big opportunity. I'm not saying they missed it. They might have decided strategically they were going for other things, cherries, for example. But if you think about what Peru can now do in terms of developing its export markets, there's a lot more blueberries to play with. It's got good access to international markets. And that will be significant. That will be key in the next few years. So this is what I was just alluding to there. You can see there's a lot of countries along the bottom that are getting into blueberries. This came from a report we did for Fruit Logistica, a free trend report. You can go to the Fruit Logistica website and download it. It's got loads of information about all produce. For this chart to actually be full, it would have to be 3 times as high. You can see the dotted line under Peru. There's twice as much space that needs to be between Spain and Peru for that to be fully accurate, but I couldn't fit it on. That's just how rapid a rise and how big an increase Peru has achieved. But you've got other countries there. You've got Poland and South Africa, of course Australia here. China is going to produce more for itself. Some of the varietal development, some of the clubs, the licensed varieties of blueberries, they're going into places like Indonesia. There's a story this week on the Fruitnet website that Berry World is going into Rwanda with, that's possibly Mountain Blue. He's nodding, yes. I'm glad I remembered that. Yeah, let's just have a little focus on Morocco. You can see a few stats there. And they've enjoyed a rapid expansion for lots of berries and lots of other products, also tomatoes. Raspberry exports 11 times bigger, blueberry exports 10 times bigger in that time. They're now the largest non-American blueberry supplier to Canada, and they're exporting to Southeast Asia in a much bigger way. And also Egypt, the production growth there has been big in strawberries. I've mentioned that already. Major expansion also expected in blueberries. There are also some of those licensed players are moving in, Agrovision to name one, moving into Egypt and producing on a large scale. Another significant development I thought I would pick out here is Mexico. Mexico has had significant challenges with labor shortages, increased costs, and the exchange rate, and its blueberry forecast is actually due to be down this year. So maybe not everyone is riding that wave in a hugely successful way, but Australia clearly has a huge potential, and that memorandum of understanding that was signed recently to develop trade when access comes into China is going to be huge. So, just to underline the point, berries are really big business now. You can see their berries in terms of volume are the 6th largest traded in the world. They're also now the world's 3rd most valuable crop. Now, Anthony made the point just before we came on that, yeah, well, it's the most valuable in Australia in the market here. That's also true in the UK, as I mentioned. But overall, you can see what's happening. They're catching up here. And why is that? Well, because the value of what you're selling is significantly more. Just to go back to the beginning when I mentioned we were asked to set up the Global Berry Congress by the guys in the UK. Around about the same time, there was a documentary on UK television, and it was profiling that industry. And there was a voiceover, and the guys were in the room. There was, I think, a gentleman called Lawrence Olins from Berry World, others from S&A, Berry Gardens, all these names that I'm sure a lot of you know. And the voiceover said, the berry barons are meeting to plot their next move. And I just thought that was incredible. I thought, well, hang on a minute. You're not talking about, sugary sweets. You're not talking about cocaine. You're not talking about any of the good stuff. No, sorry, just joking. You're talking about berries. You're talking about something that can be life-enhancing. You're talking about wholesome, excellent products. No downside whatsoever. I know you can eat too many strawberries. I have heard that. But there we go. But yeah, it's such a hugely kind of positive story. And why would you not work together to build that market when there's, let's be mercenary for a moment. There's value to be gained. Okay, so I'm going to try and move a bit more quickly through some of these stats, and then we'll get on to some of the trends. So there's the trade trends in terms of the 3 major categories. And there's what's been happening in terms of the import markets. You've had a blip, which is to do with the climate, or to do with the supply, particularly out of Peru. And there it is. I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but there is an opportunity in Asia. Now, you can see in the tons column, Asia is dwarfed by North America and Europe. But it's there. That 10% growth is important. You could arguably say that in the Middle East, there's also an opportunity. There is more imported berries going to the Middle East. But Asia is hugely full of potential. So we thought we'd put together a berry trade forecast. This comes with the obvious asterisk that this is a forecast. This is us taking, a finger to the air and saying, what do we think is going to happen? But we think given how growth has been, that the global berry trade will be $11.9 billion US dollars. I didn't even put the date on, did I? But that's this year, next year, sometime in the very near future. Sorry about it. Okay. I think we're through all the stats, you'll be pleased to know. Let's have a look at what's been driving this growth. So rising consumer demand. Berries are still often an impulse purchase, but they are, as we've seen with the importance in terms of those developed markets, they are really a product that's going into a lot of baskets. They're seen as special. And that superfood status is something that's really driving that demand. People are really busy, they want convenience, but they also want health. And berries are seen as a way to get both of those things. Crucially, and this has happened in Germany after the UK, and I think that gives you reassurance that it will happen in other markets, retailers are waking up to that idea. They're giving it more shelf space, and they continue to believe now that this is a category that is going places. And then the marketing campaigns from brands and from industry associations, that's pushing the demand even higher. So we can pretty safely say that berries have entered the mainstream. There's a picture of berries from Lidl. Lidl placing huge importance on this product as well. And just a few stats to show you, this is what can be achieved. Sales worth nearly 2 billion for the year to September 2024. The value growth has been in the order of 800-900%, absolutely huge. And there is growth in all products driven by blueberries. Same in Germany. The sales there are now worth more than 2 billion per year in a slightly larger market by population. Strong growth for imports in certain categories. Particularly in strawberries, there's a real big push for regional. And we'll come on to the idea that maybe there could be more regional, local supply in a bit. And so berries are here to stay, and retailers have bought into them. And you're seeing this kind of thing, maybe not the branded in all cases, certainly in my country, but retailers have realized that berries are brilliant when it comes to convenience. People go in, they want to do a quick shop, they want to grab something like this. This is Marks & Spencer's on the left. Marks & Spencer's knows its customers, it knows it wants this kind of thing, and the prices are good. These are good prices for a product which has incredible value. These little pots, for on-the-go eating. And even it's having an effect on the wider produce department. Those are tomatoes at the top. I've seen this a lot here in Coles and Woolies, that you get other products kind of almost mimicking the berry success. So I've seen there's a lot of tomberries here, I think, sold. I don't know how many of you buy them. But in the customer's mind, in the shopper's mind, the category is wider, potentially, than berries, that we understand as berries. This was my breakfast in Melbourne a couple of days ago. I couldn't believe it. Every single berry ticked. It was a sign. The superfood status has supercharged those sales. And you're seeing that in the press. You're seeing all these, and it's not just for blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries. I could have found 1,000 pieces of press about berries. That's wonderful. And your industry associations need to keep putting that information out there, because journalists, and by that I mean real journalists who write for the public, they want to talk about these things. They want to say, these things will do you good. And of course we write about that too. And it pervades into other products as well. Your advertising is being done by other products. That supplement there is telling them that blueberries are good for your vision, and also good for your skin. Excuse me. So the future looks very bright for berries. I don't think I'm overstating that. You've got rising disposable incomes in particular markets in Asia Pacific, Middle East. So the overall demand is increasing for fresh produce, and those eating habits are moving into those markets as well. So the desire for more convenience, the excitement about berries. I mean, in Europe we've known berries for a long time. We've picked them up on the side of the road, from the person selling them. But maybe they're a newer thing in some of these markets. And then other things, other kind of structural things that are pushing demand to do with retail and to do with how produce is distributed. That's having an effect as well. But of course, any presentation about the produce business does come with a few caveats, and there are challenges. So I want to just go through them as well. Consumers, having been given this wonderful product, they also are going to be even more demanding in future. They're not going to sit still. They're not going to say, oh yeah, I really liked having a punnet of blueberries. They're going to say, I don't want any of them to be mushy anymore. I don't want them to be completely different sizes. I don't want the little stalk on the top. And at the moment, frankly, even in the UK, a very, very developed market, 9 times out of 10, you will get that in blueberries. But the big brands have woken up to that, and they've also woken up to the fact that they need more climate-friendly, dependable, resilient sources of fruit. So what we see at Fruitnet is a huge amount of innovation going into berry supply chains. These are things that really are a no-brainer. They have to be done because the market is going to move. The demand in the marketplace is going to move. Consumers are going to take berries for granted at some point. So something's got to stand out and keep that value high. So we're seeing huge investment in licensed and managed varieties, a bit like has happened a lot in apples. So Pink Lady was an Australian idea. That's bloomed into a huge number of branded apples, all protected production, all under license. And that's going to give people better taste and flavor. It's going to give longer shelf life, better yields, quality improvement throughout, using better crop protection. Actually, some of these varieties require less crop protection. That's also a good thing. We talked about category expansion. Other more kind of mundane things, but very important, like the logistics and the cold chain, developing market access. I spoke to Jenny last night. She's doing a great job developing market access for Australia. That's so important. If you look at what's happened with the cherry deal from Chile into China this year, that dependence on that one market has been a weakness. So developing new markets is hugely important. Finding new ways to sell as well, to merchandise your products in store. All of these things, I would say, are no-brainers. So let's look at the race to secure better varieties. Many of you will know about this deal to form the world's second largest berry company. A big part of that, a big kind of plus in terms of that deal was the fact that there's a huge portfolio of genetic material which is owned, it's proprietary, and they can do great things with that. And all of these kind of different varietal developments are producing different things. Something particularly special that stands out. I know Marks and Spencer's went for this in a big way in our market. And I just picked out some of these other examples, for better tasting year-round berries. Other players getting into this. Reich's Farm was not doing berries. Now they are developing a breeding program for berries. They still won't talk about it publicly. I invited them to come to our Congress, maybe next year. And the variety investment has had no bigger effect than in Peru, I would say. It's made a huge change. You've now got 9 varieties which make up 80% of Peru's exports. Sequoia there, it's a very well-known club model. There are others available. I know the guys from Mountain Blue are here, Oz Blue, and so on. I'm sorry if I missed some out. But that's opening up huge opportunities. Livier is Sequoia, for those that don't know, with Fall Creek behind it. And they're not just developing new varieties of berry. They're saying, well, with these berries, because they're so good, you can put them in a dispenser and serve them to customers like you would oranges, in a Zumex juicer. So retailers suddenly have a different way to sell berries. That's really great. Different ways to brand them, different ways to get the consumers excited. Ultimately, that's what it's all about. It's not just about the commodity model. The banana guys, for many, many, many years, they put a sticker on it and they said, trust us, this is the best banana you're ever going to have. Well, frankly, they've been found out because bananas are all the same and consumers don't know what the difference is. But with berries, I think there's a huge opportunity with varieties to say, yep, we're the ones that, can anyone name that guy who's just scored? I'm interested. He's a Belgian footballer. He's playing in the States. Christian Benteke. No, okay. Anyway. Yeah, I'm not surprised actually. But anyway, these guys are the face of the fruitist berries, which are supplied by Agrovision, and they're Sequoia berries. Lots of brands doing their work. But yeah, for the consumer, it's a more interesting time. So from those varieties, we're getting increased year-round supply. There's big potential for brands, especially in emerging markets. But, and there is always a but. This was an interview I did with a very nice lady from Italy called Carmela. She works for, I think she used to work for Planasa, but for Nova Siri. And she said, well, hang on, there's a gap between supply and demand. And I won't read it out, but you can see it there. Effectively, if you're depending a lot on imports, sometimes those imports are more expensive, and there's a risk attached with that. And she saw that as a weakness in terms of developing year-round supply. So that brings me neatly onto the idea that maybe there's an opportunity to develop more local supply as well. So, I think we all understand there is a value to local production. If you've got a UK flag on your berries and you're selling them in Sainsbury's or Tesco, they're going to sell more. It's been proven. These were from Norway. And they look very nice, you know, and people do warm to that if it's from their own country. So there is varietal development we're seeing to develop local for local. So this is just one example of a very nice raspberry that's been grown in the Netherlands and Germany, specifically to sell them there, not to send them anywhere else in the world. And as I said, retailers, they're warm to that idea. They like the idea of sourcing it from their own country. Yeah, this is the Summer Berry Company. This is one of a couple of companies that in December supplied berries to Tesco on Christmas Day. So you could go into Tesco on Christmas Day. Why are you not home with your family? Sorry. But you could go in and buy strawberries that have been grown down the road. I guess that's like Tasmanian strawberries in June. Maybe you do have them. I don't think you do. Yeah, this is a breakthrough. This is quite a rapid change that has happened. Varieties are also being developed for greater resilience. There's a big shift in strawberries. Many of you will be aware, but shifting from the vegetative developed varieties to seed grown. This offers all of those benefits that you can see listed there. I don't need to read them out. But those sustainability and productivity benefits are really important when you consider how challenging production is becoming and the need to be closer to market. So we've got lots of varieties being developed for things like resistance as well. And I'm pleased that I put this in because John is speaking after me. You know, varieties that are developed to produce for longer in the Mediterranean. And that brings me on to what's happening in Asia. I mentioned Asia is looking like the place where growth could be largest, but then there's going to be the flip side, which is as there's more demand, players in China itself are going to wake up to that. Well, they are doing. They're developing production there. Different berries. You've got companies there like Driscoll's, Agrovision, Haygrove, putting berries into places like Yunnan, Guizhou, Sichuan, and basically modernizing and establishing supply in the local market. Similar thing happening in India. Certainly growth in imports as well, but I've said there double-digit growth in blueberries, which is phenomenal when you consider I don't think many people in India knew what a blueberry was. But you've got companies there now saying, well, we'll import them, we'll grow them, we'll do whatever because we see the opportunity. So you've got Peruvian company Camposol there taking the time to go and promote to shoppers, these are what blueberries are and you're going to buy more of them in the future. And there's just one example of how suddenly then the opportunity is there to throw the expertise from the old world, let's call it, in a very colonial term, and put it into the new world. You know, the Dutch going in with their technology as they do. So finally, some other key trends, and of course I have to apologize, I'm not going to cover everything in huge detail, but some of these other things that are coming up, I'm going to talk about technology and sustainability just finally. There are lots of other talks over the next couple of days that will focus on that. But if you ever want to know more, if I can find information for you, I'm very happy to do so. No charge, it's what we do. So firstly, the role of technology. We see a huge investment in new technologies that's going to unlock lots of these things. I put AI-enabled QC at the top of the list. I was in Berlin beginning of this month, and I was surprised by how quickly some of these things have developed. So now growers will have smartphones with the technology on, linked to the database, quality control data from many, many years previous, and they'll point it at the fruit and it will tell them whether it's okay or not. And that crowdsourced quality control is going to be a game changer. Lots of other things in a similar vein in smart agri happening, predicting what kind of demand you'll have in the market. Sometimes it's been done because somebody knows the market for many decades and they can tell, well, we're going to need strawberries around Wimbledon. Yeah, great. That's going to happen in a much more kind of technologically infused way. Robotics as well, shelf life extension and advanced genetics, which I've talked about as well. And robotics brings me on to this. In the UK, the other company that produced berries for Christmas this year was Dyson of the Hoover fame. Despite living in Singapore, he was a Brexit voter. Don't ask me about that. Despite living in Singapore, he's very invested in producing berries in the UK and doing it with robots. So we wrote about that this month in our special edition for our Berry Congress. That's going to be, it's not space age, it's not the future anymore, it's happening now. And then, just to finish on a nice foreboding slide, sorry about that, very dark. There are challenges around sustainability, environmental, ethical, and economic, to do with the climate, to do with energy. Energy costs are still a big factor, especially in Europe, and I'll come on to that, but in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, big powerhouses of berry production in Europe, strangely, the market is huge for them. They're doing fantastically, but the costs are racking up, and energy is one of the big factors in that. Labor costs as well. That's why you're seeing more investment in robotics, because labor is a challenge. Packaging, there's a big problem ahead for berry packaging in Europe. There's the so-called PPWR, which is basically a ban on plastic packaging for anything under 1.5 kilos in Europe, in the EU. But it will filter out. It will have an effect in other parts of the world. Canada is doing a similar thing. So it will be irrelevant whether it's recyclable. It will have to be different. Other big challenges, air freight. Lidl, ICA in Sweden, Albert Heijn in the Netherlands have said we're not going to air freight anymore. That's going to have an effect. And then also the ethical side of harvesting and producing berries. This was a report actually produced by the retailers and Berry World, Driscoll's Berry Gardens. It is on the agenda. It should be on your agenda as well. And then I go back to my home country. A huge, huge market, a very profitable market for the retailers, but for the suppliers, there is a challenge to try and limit those costs and to try and make it pay. So that could be a challenge for you guys as well in the future. So just to wrap up, thank you. Appreciate you listening to me with my raspy voice. But some future trends that I can point to. So we expect continued major growth in blueberry supply, in particular, pockets of regional growth in strawberries, raspberries, and blackberries, and a global berry trade, I'm going to put my neck on the line, that I think will overtake citrus in value terms by 2030-ish. Yeah. Asia is going to lead in terms of market growth. Good news for Australia. I would recommend looking elsewhere in the world as well, maybe the Middle East as well. And the marketing itself is going to focus on brands. Yes, there may be more room for brands. I think the example I'm going to give you is from New Zealand. Zespri have now got their brand in front of Tesco customers. That is a phenomenal thing. It's never happened before. And in a market like the UK, where it's really just private label, that proves that it can be done. And I think there's a bit of a shift in some of the minds of these retail buyers that actually these brands are worthwhile and worth supporting. And the varieties themselves will speak. They will become known to certain pockets of customers. So Sequoia, that's definitely happening. But maybe that can be done with others as well. You can hear my voice is going now. I'm like my 14-year-old son whose voice is breaking. So there will be different approaches to year-round, as I've said, imports and local, and further advances and investment in technology. Just to leave you with this then, the Fruitnet Berry Congress, last time we met, we came up with some conclusions at the end, and this was the advice, and I give this to you as well. You can take it or leave it, but get product to market as quickly and regularly as possible. Make sure consumers are getting excellent quality even as the market grows, so don't overstretch. Supply local where possible, but the same quality with imports, and use any tech you can to build up those supply chains so they're more resilient. If you do want to know more, I recommend you all come to Rotterdam with me in a couple of weeks. I know that's not really practical, but we have the Fruitnet Berry Congress coming up. We're also looking to do an event, I think, John, is it in October? In Australia, we're looking to see if we can offer our expertise in a probably a smaller forum. I think it might not be in Tasmania, and it might be in Coffs Harbour, but don't quote me on that. We'll see. So towards the end of the year, if you want to be on the mailing list, please let me know. And of course, I recommend you buy into our publications. You can have a subscription for free, and you can get loads of that great knowledge from all of my colleagues around the world. It's been my great pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope it's been useful, and I wish you every success. Great.